Hey class, welcome to the very last webcast of the semester. Today we're going to be going over the reproductive system. So first we're going to be talking about the female reproductive system. And specifically we're going to trace the path of, or discuss the function of the uterine tube and how oocytes move through the uterine tube to the uterus. So first off, the oocytes or eggs are, they go through development in the ovary. And during ovulation, those oocytes are then ejected from the ovary, but they don't go directly into the uterine tube. So what happens is that the oocytes are ejected from the ovary into the peritoneal cavity, and you actually lose a lot of eggs that way, or oocytes. The way that they get into the uterine tube is that you get the infundibulum right here, which is this bend right before the fimbriae. This bend here, that will flex. And these fimbriae, which have these little finger-like or flower petal-like projections, start beating and start pulsing. And that pulsatile motion coaxes the oocytes from the peritoneal cavity, which is going to be this void here, into the opening of the uterine tubes. And there's actually very little, if any, connection between the ovaries and the uterine tube. And the eggs are definitely not ejected directly into the uterine tube. So that beating motion coaxes the eggs then into... They come out of the ovary and coaxes them into the uterine tube and gets a current going. So it begins the current of the oocytes in the uterine tube. From there, once the eggs are far enough down into the uterine tube or into the uterine tube, there are ciliated cells that line the lumen of the uterine tube. And those ciliated cells then begin to beat. And that beating keeps the current going that was created by the beating of the fimbriae. And then that current allows the oocytes to move closer and closer to the uterus. And that is the basics of how the oocyte moves from the ovary into the uterine tube. And it's something that most people don't realize, is that they're not ejected directly from the ovary into the uterine tube. You actually eject eggs into the peritoneal cavity, and they're coaxed into the uterine tube. And that same thing, this is just, I've only discussed it on, or labeled it on the one side, obviously, and here's the contralateral side. And that's pretty simple compared to what we're going to talk about for the male reproductive system here. I've drawn everything out here just so that we can cruise through it. And now we're going to talk about the path that a sperm takes from the testes then out and exiting the urethra. So first we have sperm that begin to develop and are created in the testis. Right here I labeled the T. And from the testis, when the sperm leaves the testis, they're not mature sperm. So they go and they leave the testis into the head of the epididymis, which is right here. I've labeled that as with an E. And this is actually where they learn how to swim and how to fertilize an egg. From there, sperm is actually ejaculated from the epididymis and not from the testes directly. So when ejaculation occurs, sperm leaves the epididymis and begins up the vas deferens. The vas deferens. I've labeled that just vas D right here. And that's going to be, should have used a different color here, but you can see this tube here. I'll draw a line. So it goes from the testes into the epididymis, and actually towards the head specifically. And then from there, it migrates down to the tail, and then exits the tail into the vas deferens. You can see this tube right here. It's going to move up the vas deferens, and all of these structures are located within the scrotum. Within the scrotum. So you have sperm moving up the vas deferens, and then it enters the body cavity. So the scrotum is outside the body cavity. So where it enters the body cavity is called the inguinal canal. And you have an external inguinal ring and an internal inguinal ring. And then the void between those rings is called the inguinal canal. So we enter the body cavity through the inguinal canal, and we're still in the vas deferens. And it takes this loop around your urinary bladder, which I've just labeled as bladder. And the next structure comes that puts its part into the semen is going to be the seminal vesicle. The seminal vesicle. And that seminal vesicle and the vas deferens come together when this structure, this tube structure, passes through the prostate. We have a little P here. So seminal vesicle is SV, and you have, I think it's the seminal duct right here, and it's going to put its additives into the semen here. And when the vas deferens enters the prostatic urethra and combines with the seminal vesicle, when the vas deferens enters the prostate, and combines with the seminal vesicle, then that structure becomes the prostatic urethra. Prostatic urethra, so it's just the urethra within the prostate. We have the semen now that's going to continue to move through the prostate, and when the urethra exits the prostate and moves through your urogenital diaphragm, I've written that out here, which is this structure, it becomes the membranous urethra. And that's a very small segment. It's a small segment, according to drawings in your book, of this whole length here. When it exits the urogenital diaphragm, it becomes the spongy urethra. And that's what's going to be through the exit of the body here. And so your semen keeps moving, and then once it exits the internal body cavity, then it's still the spongy urethra, but now it's the spongy urethra located within the penis. And then it exits through the urinary canal, but it's just the end of the penis at where the urethra ends. And that is the path that a sperm takes, or sperm and where it's created into semen during ejaculation, and then the path that an egg takes during ovulation. Thanks for listening, and I hope you guys had a good semester with me. And if you have any feedback at all about these, please feel free to email me with the email that you have from your syllabus. Thank you very much, and goodbye.